find a posture that's fairly comfortable. But saying that, give yourself permission to change your posture at any point. Because what you're not really looking for the lotus position, you're not looking for a meditation posture. You're just looking for a posture that's comfortable, where you notice your body a little bit less, so your body's disturbing you or bothering you the least. And I know that for some of us, that's not very easy because we have physical conditions that bring about chronic pains, aches that refuse to go away, conditions that refuse to go away, and they continue to exist here in this present moment. But for that, I bring you back to how years ago it was when I spent a few weeks, about a month, in a monastery. It was in Thailand. It was a forest monastery, and it was very basic. I was asked to sit on the floor all the time. I wasn't given a mattress to sleep on. There was one meal a day, and after 3 days, my body began to ache profusely. I hadn't been used to sitting in that position for those durations of time. And so after the 3rd day, I began to complain to the monk, this isn't what I signed up for. Too painful, too uncomfortable. I can't concentrate. I can't use the tools that you're sharing with me. I just feel so frustrated. And let's just assume some of us here, we may be experiencing these sensations. Like I said, it might be an illness, a broken bone that's healing or mending. What the monk said to me, let's contemplate on these words because they really did help me, and I've used these words since. He said, the reason all you're experiencing right now are sensations. But your mind is choosing to define it as pain, as discomfort. What's happening to you is that you have memories of what it was like 4 days ago, before you began these practices. You were moving around, you were traveling here, or maybe even before that, weeks, months, years before that, I was never forced to sit for these durations. And so what he said is that you remember what it was like to not have these sensations. You have memories of what it was like to live in the absence of these sensations. And therefore you have formed an attachment to the past. And because of that attachment that you have to the past, to the absence of these sensations, you push against these sensations. You're fighting against them. And then he told me that you seem quite able-bodied, and you're right, you could leave this monastery, you could get up, you could stretch, you could do whatever you want. You don't have to follow these practices. But so long as we inhabit these human bodies, there will, for every single one of us, he said, come a day when something in the body may not function the way we would like it to. And discomfort will arise. And you will not be able to stand up and stretch and move away from it. You will need to face it. And that's what this practice is about. It's about making peace with the present moment. And then that day, he asked me to return. He gave me the instructions to observe, to experience the sensations. So do that. If whatever you're experiencing through your body, just experience it. And then notice how your body labels it. Some of us, it might be comfort. You might not even be noticing your body. But for one or two of us, the mind is labeling these sensations as pain, as discomfort, as tightness, as pins and needles. And by all means, do change your posture if you've reached that stage. You may lie down, you may adopt any posture you want. But if it still doesn't go away, just notice this labeling: discomfort, pain. And then begin giving this sensation. Initially, just as you see these labels arising, release them. And I know that's not that easy. But the second stage is giving these sensations permission to exist. And for this, it's always helpful to release the past. And here, I'm going to ring the bell so that we can all release the past together. For some of us, this past might involve 10 minutes ago, before the practice started, as you were moving around, as you were perhaps doing yoga, stretching, getting your seats ready. And for some of us, it might involve releasing everything prior to the ringing of the bell, all of the work meetings, all of the conversations that took place with our family members, within our relationships, our friendships, work, colleagues. So that we may just arrive more fully and a little bit lighter into this present moment. And if you're a visual person, just imagine yourself climbing into your body. Because it's quite clear that the mind is more likely, it's very likely, in fact, still wondering about, thinking about those conversations, all of those plans that you have for later on. And if you've been watching the news, perhaps even a little bit of anxiety thrown in about COVID and economies and everything else. But the bell, a call to attention. Whereas you climb into this form called your body, you can wriggle your fingers to know that you're here. You can wriggle your toes. Find the bend around your knee and your elbows, the positioning of your head in relation to the neck and the rest of the body. How the weight is distributed, how your body balances itself in this posture. All you're doing is using your body as a doorway into the present moment. Because at least intellectually we know that it is our bodies that are present in this moment called the now. The mind, a whole different story, still very likely moving. Because it's supposed to. It's the very nature of the mind to move. In yesterday's session, we spoke about how an enlightened teacher, a so-called enlightened teacher, tried explaining to the student that even in enlightenment, the mind continues to operate because it needs language. It needs to know how to use computers. It needs to know how to drive or walk or how to get food. And so the mind a tool. This practice reminding us of this very simple fact that the mind is a tool and we do not need to allow ourselves. For example, right now, if you were thinking about a disturbing experience in your past, if you were thinking about a conversation or some work meeting, you would immediately ask yourself, is it relevant to this practice? Not really, because all you're doing right now is sitting here or lying down with your eyes closed and you're breathing. And so rather than allow the mind to take us away to those things which really don't matter that much to this practice, they are important, but they can be dealt with at the appropriate now moment, and that now moment isn't now. And in this now moment, it's very simple. That's why we call this a meditation practice. Simply because you've eliminated and removed many of the variables that normally stimulate thought. Have you noticed? Phones have been silenced. We've asked those around us for privacy. We're hopefully quite comfortable in terms of having had a snack or food, prepared this comfortable seat. And so anything that has little or nothing to do with this sitting and breathing, you can release. But what you do want to bring out are only those bits of information from the mind that are relevant to the present moment. And remember, this is a practice, so you're practicing as you sit down. Later on, you'll be shopping. At some point, you might be having a conversation. At some point, you might be cooking, you might be eating. And you will gradually train your mind to present only information that is relevant to your present moment, so that you may taste the food like never before, so that you may breathe like never before, so that you may Enjoy every step that you take like never before. Every scent that enters in through your nostrils and noses and sense of smell like never before. Each an opportunity to simply step outside of all of those irrelevant stories and into this present moment. But you will already start noticing how agitated and impatient the mind gets. And that's good because you are noticing it. And usually the mind gets agitated and impatient simply because the mind likes to be stimulated. It likes to be stimulated. It likes things that are interesting. It likes to shop, it likes stories, it likes theater, it likes movies, it likes books, and all of these are not bad at all. They're not bad. But as you begin to observe your mind, which is why we're here, you'll notice how quickly it gets bored. How the stimulation is constant. The need for stimulation is constant, which is why movies get more violent and they're trying to tap into parts of the human mind which the mind is unfamiliar with. Because the mind gets bored very easily. And this by no means is an indication to stop shopping and going after all of those beautiful things that we enjoy, but simply an opportunity to stop and observe how long we enjoy those things, those people. Are they permanent? Are they impermanent? Did you enjoy the new car as much as you did when it first arrived in your garage? Or have you stopped noticing it? Have you stopped noticing the walls around you in this room that you now inhabit? That perhaps once was a novelty, was incredible when you first moved in. Those pieces of art on your walls, those sculptures. This practice, this simple practice of sitting and breathing is something we will bring with us as we leave this meditation room, this virtual meditation room, so that we may continue to be aware of the mind and its nature. And then once it gets bored, have you noticed? Once it gets bored of the new car, of the home, of the new shoes, of the new pieces of clothing, it's the next item. Or sometimes it begins seeking out problems because that's stimulation too. That's stimulation too. What should I worry about now that everything else has been fulfilled? Every other box has been ticked. And then it takes us to those slightly darker places. But remember, we are simply observing. This may not happen, this may happen, but the key to this practice is to observe, to learn how to observe, to practice observing. And so just notice, where is your mind right now? Where is your mind right now? Wherever the mind is, don't chastise yourself. Don't punish yourself. Don't criticize yourself. Because this is a practice where we simply give the mind permission to think, to move, to flow like a stream, to flow like a thought stream. The thought stream that it has always been. A thought stream that began somewhere high up in a hill or a mountain. That point we entered into this planet as tiny little babies. And then we went to nursery, we were given books, we had parents or foster homes or whatever it is, wherever it is you were. Books, magazines, movies, religion. And they all added to the momentum that we now find. This current, this movement within the stream. For some of us, it's a white water rapid, moving so fast, so quickly. And for some of us, a little slower, that you can see the pebbles and everything else at the base of the stream. And for some of us, somewhere in between, but a stream that flows. And this is where we release all definitions we have of meditation. Because I know that in my own life, there was a point in my life when I believed I could not meditate simply because I associated and defined meditation as having a still mind, a quiet mind. And so every time I sat down, I believed I needed to build a dam to stop this flow. Because I looked at the statues of the Buddha and the yogis and images and pictures that I grew up with. They looked so peaceful, they looked so still, they looked so joyous, so happy with their knowing smiles. They must have had empty minds. And then I would give up. I wouldn't attempt to meditate. Because every time I built a dam, the water either came over it or around it. And the thoughts would begin, and then I would have to keep building walls and walls and walls, and it became exhausting until I completely gave up, believing that meditation wasn't for me. But in this practice, you can, with the ringing of this bell, release all definitions that you have given to this practice. And so you no longer need to meditate, you no longer need to be mindful. Just sit and breathe. And in fact, that's what Zen masters refer to this practice as. Simply as sitting. They don't ask their fellow practitioners, how long have you been practicing meditation? They just ask, how long have you been sitting? And so we're sitting and breathing. And notice, sitting, it's something we're all familiar with, isn't it? We're all familiar with this posture called sitting. And this is where we use the information contained within the mind. Only so far as is relevant to this posture called sitting. And so using, of course, you only know where your elbows are because you learned where the elbows are. And that information is contained within the mind. So find your elbows. And so when you hear my voice asking you to find your elbows, you extract from your mind all of the information that it has about the elbow, and then you locate it down your arms. Experience the bend around your elbows, within your elbows. Heighten your sensitivity so that you are now able to distinguish the outer shell of the elbow from the inner. And within the elbow, those muscles, those ligaments, just experiencing them and noticing whether they feel loose or tight. And if there is any tightness, simply loosening them, allowing your arms, your forearms, to just rest on whichever part of the body or surface they find themselves in. And using the sensations that are coming in through the skin, the elbows, the upper arms, and the shoulders, through experience, through your experience of these sensations, build up a little image of what your arms should look like, but purely through experience. This is an example of you using your mind. And one really nice thing you can also let go of, in addition to those labels called meditation and mindfulness, is everything bad you've ever heard about the mind, about the ego, about the personality. Because many Eastern practices, they sometimes lead you to believe that the mind is an enemy, that the ego should be destroyed before you can find any peace. But this practice isn't really like that. Because soon, and some of you may already know this, the more you fight against something, the more you push against something, it pushes back in equal effect. That's a simple law of physics which applies to the mind as much as anything else. Just like the war on terror and the war on drugs and pregnancies and all of that. We're simply using a different approach. We're beginning to understand how useful the mind is, and simply transform our relationship with the mind. Maybe even smiling in the process as we continue to explore the weight of our arms. Finding your shoulders, relaxing your shoulders, letting the weight of your arms pull your shoulders down. And how the shoulders, they attach to the chest and the upper back. The chest, that brings about a whole range of new sensations. At the surface level, the sensation of skin against fabric. And underneath the skin, the muscle. Using the bell to loosen and relax all of the muscles and all of the skin. And at a deeper level, noticing its rising and its falling. As the lungs expand and then contract to the rhythm of your breath. As you breathe in, the chest wall rising. And of course the stomach wall as well. Can you notice as you breathe in, how the front of your body, it all dances upward. The stomach, the chest walls, reacting to the ballooning of the lungs. The stomach wall, reacting to the ballooning of the stomach. And how they fall as you exhale and as you release. Just breathing naturally, breathing comfortably, bringing us back to the very simple fact that in addition to sitting, one other crucial aspect of this present moment is that we are breathing, sitting and breathing. A moment ago, I asked you to notice how impatient the mind sometimes gets, how bored the mind gets. And of course, that is usually a beautiful indication of how we have spent much of our lives stimulating it, exciting it, either with problems or with beauty, with things of interest rather than beauty. Perhaps beauty isn't the right word because everything's beautiful in this practice once you begin releasing judgment. But the reason we're focusing on this simple posture called sitting or lying down, the reason we are bringing our attention to the breath is also because it's boring. And by boring, I simply mean neutral. It's not that interesting, for most of us at least. I know the case may be different if you've recently had asthma or suffer from breathing difficulties, but for most of us, you'll notice most practices bring you back to the breath, simply because for most people, it just happens in the background. It's a function that's neither liked nor disliked. Just like this posture, which is hopefully the most comfortable posture that you can find, given the current circumstances. Because when you find a space of neutrality that you can focus on, it no longer stimulates new thoughts. Because you neither like nor dislike the breath. You neither like nor dislike the posture. And where no new thoughts are generated, you simply begin the process of observing the current flow, the current thoughts. And in many ways, it's a little bit like having a fan, one of those electric fans. It might be a ceiling fan or a desk fan that you're more familiar with. And turning the power source off. And so what happens when you switch off the power source to the fan? The blades continue to spin. But the blades are moving. The process whereby the blades begin to slow down begins. And so you have the simple task of observing this process where the blades gently and gradually slow down. And of course, it's very tempting to try to stop the blades if we define meditation as a still mind. It's so tempting to put a stick through, or sometimes you would use your fingers to stop the blades, but we know that that is not very safe. And so in this practice, we just observe the blades, observe the flow as it slows down, bit by bit. Until you begin smiling at one point, because initially, when the blades were moving really quickly, when you were constantly stimulating your mind, when you were having that discussion or debate, that was like turning the power on and then switching the speed dial from level 1 to level 2, maybe even from level 2 to level 3, so that the mind moved faster and faster and faster until the mind completely takes us over, complete identification with the mind. And it looks so much larger than it actually is, as all three blades blend into each other and it becomes one large circle, which you have no chance of stopping until you enter this present moment. where you find yourself sitting or lying down and breathing. You bring yourself back to the sensations that seem to indicate this process called breathing. This time you can explore the temperature of the breath around your nostrils, within your nasal passage. What's the temperature like when it flows in? Doesn't it give you a reasonably good description of the temperature of the room that you're in or the space that you're in? And then when you breathe out, how it's changed. The warmth, perhaps a closer indication of your body's temperature than the room, this incredible change. And then you explore the humidity level. And notice once again, this isn't that interesting. It just happens. It's always happened since the day we were born. And so as you bring yourself back into this present moment, once again, you turned off the power source that feeds the fan, that feeds the mind, and you can now simply observe and watch as it slows down. And every facilitator, every teacher describes this as a practice, simply because there will be moments when we turn it on. And the practice is becoming aware of it. Sometimes it may take a few seconds, sometimes it may take a few minutes, and sometimes even hours before we notice we have turned it on. But ultimately, we will, through practice, come to the realization and understanding that this is occurring and happening, and use it as the very trigger that brings us immediately, just like the ringing of this bell, boom, back into the present moment. Almost as though we were observing ourselves having the conversation, rushing for that late meeting, looking at that bank statement or that bill, but from the present moment. The ability to distinguish the story from this moment called the now. The ability to distinguish the story from that which we are now tapping into called consciousness and awareness. Just sit. Just breathe and arrive back into this present moment. Still aware of the spinning fan, but for some of us, beginning to notice the outline of the three blades and smiling, that three tiny little blades can appear as so much more when the mind moves the way it once did. I'll ring the bell. An opportunity to stretch your bodies, to perhaps find a new posture, to stretch, to have that sip of water, to press the reset button so that you find yourself refreshed and beginning anew as we move into the final moments of this practice. I'm gonna bring my cat into the room. Come on in. In this part of the practice, let's move into a visualization practice that will hopefully consolidate our understanding of this very vague relationship that we have with our mind. Because for most of us, we've come to identify ourselves as our mind, and so a roller coaster ride. When we find something outside of us that we like and enjoy, we find ourselves experiencing one of those highs. And when we find ourselves experiencing one of those things that we do not like, or we do not want, or that we fear, we find ourselves experiencing one of those lows. And most of us have arrived in this meditation room simply because we're beginning to realize that we no longer need to identify ourselves as the mind and in this way, and therefore can simply be spectators in this whole drama called life. And so let's visualize ourselves sitting not as spectators to this roller coaster ride, but as spectators within a theater. It could be a cinema, or it could be a theater where they have plays. And at the beginning, the spotlights, they seem to shine on the whole stage. You've caught this play mid-scene. And so the story has been happening, the story's been going on, there are actors, there's incredible directing. And you seem to be familiar with many of the characters in this play. In fact, one of them bears a remarkable resemblance to you. And the acting is so convincing. It's Academy Award and Golden Globe Award material. The directing, the writing, immaculate, perfect, convincing. And you get completely drawn into the story. You experience the emotions that the characters are going through. You are giving meaning to every emotion that is being experienced by the characters. You can feel their thoughts, know what they are thinking. You are no longer thinking your own thoughts. Which is how Eckhart Tolle describes the actual act of watching movies and television and the theater. When someone asked him, I find watching television a lot easier than meditating. I find myself experiencing so much peace. I no longer have any problems when I turn on the television. Can I just watch TV instead of meditate? And Eckhart Tolle, his response was quite simple. He said it's simply because you have put yourself in an allowing state where you have now taken on all of the thoughts and emotions of the characters on the screen, on the stage. Which is why we shed tears and we laugh and we go through a whole range of experiences when we watch great storytelling. And Eckhart Tolle, he goes on to explain, and that is why advertisers pay as much as they do to interrupt those programs, simply because we are in a completely receptive state, that we begin to believe we need the car, we need those electronics, we need to look the way those models look. We're in a complete state of allowing hypnosis. He likens it to hypnosis. But in this case, this play, it's our life. It's what's the drama that's going on around us. Now suddenly, if you can imagine, right now the spotlights are all turned, all focused on the stage, on all of the characters. That's dramatic music, incredible lighting. But all of a sudden, with the ringing of this bell, all the spotlights, they shift. And they begin to focus on you, the observer, audience member, witness. You are becoming more present. Bring yourself back to your breath, your fingers, those surfaces underneath your body that tell you that you are seated on these cushions and these chairs. All of the lights focusing on this being who is present here, sitting, breathing. And then you begin to notice that the stage is separate. And then you begin to count the number of rows between yourself and the stage. How many? 1 row? 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? Or maybe 9 rows. There is space between yourself, your witnessing self, and the story that is unfolding in front of you. And you continue to observe the play, the happenings. You hear the voices, you see the images, you listen to the dramatic music, but it all feels different from this new perspective called reality, the present moment. And that's not all. Because of the wise soul that you are, you begin to recognize all of the different challenges that this character that resembles you has been through since the beginning of this play. And there have been many. There have been many adventures, many tears, many moments of grief, and so much more. But they all led to this moment. And it always worked out. It always worked out. If it didn't work out, you would not be here in this comfortable space that you have now allocated to yourself. The journey brought you to this moment, this present moment. And if it always worked out in the past, you know, it's almost as though you've read the synopsis to this whole story and you know the director, and there's always a happy ending. There's always a happy ending. And every emotion, every worry, every anxiety can now be released in that knowing that it is always, always, always working out. Where this moment becomes a stepping stone to the next moment, where there is greater wisdom, greater understanding, and always more kindness. With hearts that continue to open and blossom like the magnificent flowers that will soon begin to appear as spring arrives. Every experience, invaluable, precious, but grounding ourselves as this witness, as we bring this short practice to a close, but begin the true practice, where we bring this kindness, this wisdom, this presence, this self, this witnessing self, so full of kindness. As the day begins to unfold before us from breath to breath and moment to moment. And here's the final bell. like to sincerely thank all of you for joining me in this beautiful practice. Thank you.